Hi everyone, welcome to Caracatchella 2020. I'm Christine McKinnon, Head of Intelligence at Dentsu, and I have with me today our esteemed guest, Michael Brown, who is the MD of Client Services at MKTG in the UK, but also a musician and member of the famous brand Giant Killers, recently toured Australia over Christmas. You're also someone who's managed to fly a hot air balloon through the raised drawbridges of Tower Bridge and also kickstarted the world's first mental health drop-in centre inside a soup kitchen. It sounds like an amazing initiative. But to top all of that off, Michael has just written what we think is going to be an absolute bestseller, a book called I Don't Agree. And that book is about negotiation and conflict resolution. And it's relevant to every one of us, no matter the scale of conflict we deal with. You have accolades from the likes of Seth Godin, through to diplomats, Tom Fletcher, the former British ambassador to Lebanon, and Jules Chappell, the former ambassador to Guatemala and conflict advisor to the British embassy in Addis Ababa. So, really esteemed people, really praising your book there. And I'm actually hoping that your greatest moment will be being my knight in shining armour today and helping me resolve some conflict. So welcome, Michael.
Why, thank you, Christine. Thanks for the introduction. It was, I think I was blushing slightly there. That did seem like a bit of a list of accolades. I am getting on a bit, so I've managed to, cram in a few things into life for sure. I would say it wasn't me who actually flew the hot air balloon through Tower Bridge. I'm not a balloon pilot, but I did arrange for that to happen. As part of a stunt to promote a film called Up. By Disney Pixar, which was back in 2009 now. But yes, yeah. But no, thanks for the introduction, Christine, and lovely to be here. Thanks for having me. Sure, the book is called I Don't Agree. It is a business philosophy book. It is about conflict resolution in very broad terms. It is out on July the 1st. Maybe we can give away a few copies here when it comes out. I'll send them over to Australia for you. And it takes on in order to be your knight in shining armour. I guess I need to solve some problems for you, and I know we've had a bit of a discussion about the conflict between your kids, and that's a fairly common problem. In an effort to find out about conflict resolution, I wanted to find out about more where it stems from, and obviously. That goes right back to childhood and sibling rivalry. And I came across a very interesting academic called Professor Laurie Kramer, who's based over in the US and is an expert on child conflict. I was reading a lot of her work, and she found that sibling conflicts happen at the phenomenal rate of 3.5 times an hour for every day. So if you do the maths on that, which is something I did, it occurred to me to do was that you think about, so how much sleep do kids need? Maybe 10 hours at that age, so between three to the age of 7. So that leaves 14 hours. So if you times 14 by 3.5, you get to 49. So that's 49 conflict exchanges every day. And then if you multiply that by 5 years, so from ages 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then you get to a whopping 89,425 conflict exchanges. So by the time you reach the age of 8, you're very well rehearsed if you've got a brother or a sister in combat. And I think that's a part of your problem, isn't it, Christine? You're an only child, so you haven't had these practice.
Exactly. So, and I've got 3 children, 13 and under, and my husband's from a big family of 6, and here I am like a lamb to the slaughter, coming into this family that by now are incredibly skilled at, combat and arguments and negotiating, and I'm just kind of, I'm the not well trained one that's completely at the disadvantage. So, and no wonder I'm so exhausted as a mother. I think that I am always trying to resolve and quieten them down, and, trying to, constantly separate them and resolve the fights. And 5 minutes later, they kind of waltz off and they're best friends again. And I'm kind of left curled up in the corner, exhausted from what I've been through. So, I mean, I really wanted to talk to you today about how I can transform myself into a commando mum and take back control of my own home.
Commando mum, yes, a good military analogy there when we're talking about conflict resolution skills. Absolutely. Well, look, I don't think anyone should beat themselves up about it. Going back to the amount of time we've all had in rehearsal of conflict situations, it's worth looking at the hours spent as well. So, going back to Laurie Kramer, she contended that those 3.5 conflict exchanges, they ate up about 10 minutes on average in every hour. And you can do the maths on that. That's 2.5 hours every day. That adds up to nearly 4,258 hours by the time you reach age 8. And then, of course, it goes on. There's middle childhood and early adolescence. We find wider bunches of people to fall out with. So parent-child conflict, playground altercations, child and authority figure like teachers. There's lots of ways to sharpen our conflict skills. And at the same time, we don't get, even if we're raised amongst a squadron of siblings, we don't get the same amount of practicing in sorting it all out in conflict resolution. In fact, a whole load of research done amongst children of that age group suggests that childhood conflict goes unresolved in more than 90% of the time. So there's those 10% of peacemakers and ambassadors, but overwhelmingly we've all got very well honed and sharpened conflict skills. So nobody needs to beat themselves up. So I should add, I'm not an expert in child psychology. So all of the knowledge I have gleaned is just from the research I've done into the origins where conflict comes from. And that said, I do have 3 children myself, so I'm sort of, I know the battleground. But there are some measures, according to the research, and again going back to Laurie Kramer, which she calls preemptive strikes, which again it sort of marries up with your ambition to becoming a commando mum. Quite like that image.
I feel like I need some of that. I feel like I need some preemptive strikes.
Absolutely. So the preemptive strikes that the experts recommend, I guess, fall into sort of three buckets. One is collaborative problem solving, which is when you wait till the heat of battle has subsided and then revisit the problem in an effort to resolve it when the emotions have calmed down, if you like. In fact, there was a quite a wide scale study done in 2006 between sibling dyads, which is a research term for literally pairs. That was called How Siblings Solve Conflict, and it was by Hildy and Michael Ross. Yes, right, who were professors at Waterloo University in the States. And they got mum and dad and kids to sit back round a table to revisit an old argument to see if they could find a resolution. And the resolution was found in nearly 50% of the times in all those research. And that is literally about mum and dad tipping in, or any parent, not just mum and dad, tipping in to really discuss and roll out the situation in very clear and transparent terms, with a view to reaching an end goal. Because in the heat of the moment, it's what most parents tend to do, the research suggests, is that they step in with an authoritarian, you will do this, do as I say so type approach, and that usually ends in a revisit of the conflict once mum and dad have left the room, essentially. So that was one version. That was one of the buckets. The other one was reward and praise. So always being consistent to celebrate whenever a child does get something right, i.e. does share a toy, for instance. So well done, Tarkin, let's go and get a cornetto, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So always being observant to those occurrences when a child does get it right, and always put it up on a pedestal and celebrate it, so that the child knows that they've done something good. And then related to that, the third bucket was about walking the walk and modelling positive behaviours in your own relationships, really. So any arguments you have as a parent, take them out the room, so you're not role modelling negative behaviour and argumentative habits in front of the kids. And it was those three buckets, essentially: collaborative problem solving, reward and praise, modelling positive behaviours, consistently applied over the long term, that leads to more harmonious relationships. Easier said than done. And like I say, it's easy for parents to resort to, you will do this now because I say so, without any reason or rationale behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely what I do. So I'm going to take that all on board, and I'm going to let you know. And I might just recontact you if it's not working, and perhaps you can join one of those roundtable sessions I'm going to be having with my children. That will be amazing. So I think, these tactics that you talk about in your book, it's not just all about family and trying to bring families back under, into harmony. But, you talk about situations, that are far more, far more wide-reaching. And I think it's very interesting that, collaboration's only going to be more important now as we go into, the post-COVID lifestyle that we're going to be leading. We're going to be working from home more. There's going to be less ability to kind of touch base with people in the office environment. And, I just want to know what the best advice around collaboration, whether it's at the office or whether it's at a higher level, maybe cross country, what sort of advice can you give everyone on the call today about how we're going to achieve that great state of collaboration moving forward?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got all the answers to that one, Chris. It's a big question, absolutely. I do attempt to take that on in the book. So the ambition of the book is actually, is to get to is to be willing to reach a middle ground position more often, is to do better collaboration, and it is to reach compromise, which is why the book is called I Don't Agree, because not agreeing with people is a natural human condition. There are so many perspectives. We're such a diverse society, and we're all coming together and mixing more in greater ways, thanks to lots and lots of phenomena, one of which of course is the internet. So we're all intimately aware of other people's types of lifestyle. Immigration, of course, and travel brings us all closer together. So the world seems to be smaller, and the population's getting ever larger. So we all definitely need to learn to take the perspective of other people with other backgrounds, with other cultural upbringings, with other beliefs and behaviours, and learn how to understand that and accommodate that. And that is what I'm trying to take on in the book. So taking a perspective, putting yourself in other people's shoes, to walk a little, to try and walk in your mind's eye at least, a mile in other people's shoes, and from there to make better decision making. So the book itself is a 10-step guide, and it takes on prejudices such as racism, for instance, or other prejudices, homophobia. It takes on the equality question. So arguably one of the last great conflicts between for humanity is the ongoing sort of, we do risk being factionalized by gender, gender equality, the gender pay gap. All of these problems are stuff that are problems that haven't been solved currently. So against all of that background, along comes this global pandemic crisis. And now we all seem to be taking another perspective, a kinder perspective. I think we're all talking about collaborative, the need to be kinder, and the need to discover or rediscover our kindness gene, if you like. And that's something that I've noticed as one of the, I guess, if there is an advantage of this pandemic, it has been that everybody's discovered this, that we need to rethink the future. So I'm going to say that I guess my book might be timely, or it might not be timely enough. Maybe it should have come out a year ago. And well, look, there is a section in the book which deals specifically with collaboration, and actually how really it is an ideal, and we're not really that good at collaboration. The situation before COVID arrived, and you think about the polarization of the world, really. So we collectively we're rubbish at agreeing stuff, aren't we? So we can't agree on which values that we should cherish and which to abhor, which whether an ideology should be defended with our lives or violently imposed on others, which religion's right or wrong, whether capitalism is fairer than socialism. We can't cut a middle ground, can we, between evolution in terms of Darwinism and religion? So is there a middle ground between creation and evolution? Whose version of the truth is a lie? And so we can't even agree if global warming exists or it doesn't exist. There's plenty of science on both sides of the debate, which both represent vested interests, let's face it. So amazingly, if you believe one set of people, global warming doesn't exist, and if you believe another set, it does exist. And there's a lot of debate around that. We can't even agree on which wine is better, red or white wine, or whether football's better than rugby. So there's a lot of falling out that goes on in the world. And worse than all of the above, of course, is that even when we know something needs doing, we can't really agree on the right way to do things. And I can sort of bring some of all that up in one word, certainly from a UK perspective, by using the term Brexit. Now, that polarised our particular country for the last 3 or 4 years, and amazingly, that conversation has disseminated now in light of a global pandemic. So what threatened to bring us all to blows in the UK has now, the conversation's at least been deferred, but we don't hear anything about it because the pandemic seems to have reset our values, if you like. So we're all in this together, and that's a phrase that keeps being bandied around world media. And that means that we have to find better ways to collaborate, to reach compromise, and to reach agreement. And it's a rediscovery of new values, and kindness is an interesting one. Going back to kindness as a value in business, it doesn't actually exist. If you look at the FTSE 100, for instance, 84 of those companies publish a values framework. All of those are quite aspirational, and they include things like collaboration. They include integrity. Integrity is a big one. 35 of the FTSE 100 have the word integrity as part of their values framework. But yet, do major corporations act with integrity? Well, certainly not 100% of the time. But values like kindness, they don't exist in business terms. But if they did, what would the world look like? So would there be 0 hours contracts, for instance, or would there be plastic in the seas? Arguably not. And I think if there's one thing that the pandemic has focused around, is that things will need to be different after it stops blighting our horizon. And in order to get to a better world, if you like, we are going to have to learn to compromise, reach agreement, and collaborate better. And it's fair to say that those 3 qualities have remained elusive over the course of humanity. And my book attempts, by referring to lots and lots of experts who aren't me in the field, to show how those things might be achieved.
Okay. Um, Going through the experience of writing the book, what were, two of the things that you were most shocked to learn? What were the two or three major things that really changed your perspective on things?
Well, it's been an interesting journey, absolutely, and it has been in composition for 6 years, and there's loads of things that definitely shocked or certainly raised an eyebrow. One of which was going back to an earlier part of the conversation, the fact that even before we reached the age of 8, we're highly likely to have had over 89,000 conflict situations just with our nearest and dearest.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you extend that to your wider social circle, then we've all reached genius levels of ability in that. So no wonder, essentially, there's so much trouble in the world. And as I said, when it comes to sorting it out, there's a whole load of research that suggests that 90% of all interpersonal conflict goes unresolved. So that's quite shocking in a way as well, isn't it? There's a lot of unhappiness and a lot of damage to your psyche that gets done by the fact that you have to live with unresolved conflict. Obviously, there's minor conflict and major conflict, but but we're all living essentially. And what that research seems to suggest is that we're all living with a whole load of unresolved conflict throughout our lives. So that was one shocking aspect. And then there was one other I was looking at about perspective taking, and there was and I was looking at prejudices and how we might take on our own unconscious biases.
Yeah.
And I was looking at some of the research around the roots of prejudices, and prejudice seems to be culturally acquired. So we're not born prejudiced. That the research would seem to suggest that we're all any of our prejudices, whatever they are, whatever what's our favourite food on a minor scale, but also racism and homophobia and all those sort of antiquated what might be thought of as cultural norms in some societies. And there was some research from 50 years ago which was done in America, and it was about the propensity of white people to help black people in crisis situations. And there were two pieces of research that were set up. One was they had a whole lot of black families in a broken down car situation on the side of the road, and statistically speaking, white people were more inclined to drive past without helping, whereas they would be more inclined to stop and help a family if they were another white family. There was a similar one done with telephone calls, where an ostensibly different sounding voice rang up a selection of white people to ask for help over the phone, and that wasn't given in 9 out of 10 times if the voice sounded as if it was from a different country or from a foreign or from a voice foreign to the person receiving the call. So I found that quite an alarming thing, really, and then thought, well, has that changed 50 years down the line, or is there any research that suggests that we've got more open because the world is now a more diverse place? But while there were some suggestions that has been the case, it was also suggested that we found more because harbouring prejudices is now definitely not something that's expected in society. So therefore, people have found more subtle ways to hide their prejudices, which do manifest in unconscious biases, essentially. So I've done a whole section on how you combat your own unconscious bias, and I thought those two for me were shocking. Those two elements were quite shocking for me, because if you're going to take on compromise, or you're going to learn to compromise and learn to collaborate, then you're going to need to take on the perspective of other peoples, of other cultures, and learn more about other cultures, or what's called to acculturate. So where you learn more about other people's cultures by actively mixing with them.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to thank you for your time today. I think that your book and all that you've written is a wonderful lesson in human connection, and the moments that really should bring us together in harmony rather than drive us apart in conflict. So thank you for your time, Michael Brown. And I urge everyone who is on this call to absolutely nab a copy of his book, I Don't Agree. And we will have a couple of copies to give away to some of the attendees of Couchella today. So thank you, Michael. And, I wish you all the win-win situations ahead of you. And I hope your book's a massive success.
Oh, well, I'll certainly be hoping for that, Christine. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been very enjoyable, and good luck with your future conflict resolution skills and being a commando mum.